In its second such deployment in nearly a week, the U.S. Air Force sent two B-1B Lancer supersonic bombers halfway around the globe to the South China Sea, whereas Chinese forces have increasingly rubbed shoulders in recent days, including the ejection of a U.S. warship from contested waters. Earlier this week, two U.S. Air Force B-1B Lancer bombers made a 32-hour round-trip flight from South Dakota to conduct operations over the South China Sea as part of a Bomber Task Force mission, the Air Force announced on Thursday. This operation demonstrates the U.S. Air Force's dynamic force employment model in line with the National Defense Strategy's objectives of strategic predictability with persistent bomber presence, assuring allies and partners, the release stated. The Pentagon has moved to adopt a dynamic force employment system as a way of keeping its adversaries off guard by breaking up routine deployments and force movements. Photos posted by the Pentagon Media Hub Defense Visual Information Distribution Service, DVIDS, show the supersonic bombers, which hailed from Ellsworth Air Force Base, refueling over the Pacific Ocean en route to Southeast Asia. One bystander in Washington state seemed to spot the two Lancers near the KC-135 aerial refueling aircraft, posting photos on Twitter Thursday evening. This is the second time in nearly a week the U.S. Air Force has sent Lancers on a dramatic, globe-trotting intimidation flight. On April 24th, Sputnik reported that a Lancer had flown to Japan and joined a slew of US and Japanese fighters in drills over the Sea of Japan, just a few hundred miles from where North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was believed to be convalescing after surgery. The 30-hour surprise flight was also operated out of Ellsworth. Wednesday's South China Sea visit, however, happened amid a much more tense situation on Tuesday, Sputnik reported, citing Chinese media, that People's Liberation Army Navy (PLAN) forces had expelled the U.S. destroyer USS Barry from waters near the Paracel Islands, an island chain in the South China Sea claimed by both China and Vietnam. Chinese air and naval forces expelled a U.S. warship that trespassed into Chinese territorial waters off the Zhishan Islands in the South China Sea, as the U.S. move could have easily caused an accident, the Global Times wrote, using the Chinese name for the island chain. The message came with a taunt, urging the U.S. to focus on the COVID-19 outbreak at home, rather than engaging in overseas provocations, an echo of the messages sent to Beijing for months following military encounters. The U.S. later admitted to the Barry's transit, calling it a Freedom of Navigation Operation, FONOP, a type of mission in which US and allied warships flaunt the territorial claims of nations like China by behaving as if their claimed territorial waters are actually international waters. This was the Barry's second such mission in a week, as it had left its battle group in the South China Sea just days earlier to sail through the Taiwan Strait, which Beijing regards as internal waters. By conducting this operation, the United States demonstrated that these waters are beyond what China can lawfully claim as its territorial sea, and that China's claimed strait baselines around the Paracel Islands are inconsistent with international law, a U.S. Pacific Fleet spokesperson told CNN on Tuesday. Reality has proven once again that the U.S. is the biggest facilitator of the militarization of the South China Sea, and is a troublemaker for the region's peace and stability, Ministry of National Defense spokesperson Senior Colonel Wu Jin told reporters on Thursday, China Daily reported. The PLA will remain on high alert and adamantly safeguard national sovereignty, security, and development interests, as well as the peace and prosperity of the region, Wu noted. The U.S. Naval Institute had published a proposal earlier in April calling for Washington to issue letters of marque to privateers as a method of countering Chinese naval forces in the South China Sea, which he called an act of piracy. These actions are criminal activities explicitly prohibited under international laws, and will absolutely receive joint opposition and severe backlash from the international community, Wu said. An Air Force B-1B Lancer from the 28th Bomb Wing at Ellsworth Air Force Base, SD, prepares to refuel during a 34-hour round-trip sortie to the Indo-Pacific region, Judy, Avril 30, 2020. UNA's military continued its week-long show of force in the South China Sea with the sortie over the contested waters on Thursday by 2 Air Force bombers. The B-1B Lancers from the 28th Bomb Wing at Ellsworth Air Force Base, SD, flew a 32-hour round trip to conduct operations over the sea as part of a joint bomber task force by the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and U.S. Strategic Command, the Air Force said in news release Thursday. The mission further demonstrated the service's new dynamic force employment model, which is intended to make its global bomber presence less predictable, the Air Force said. China has claimed sovereignty over much of the South China Sea, an assertion disputed by other nations with competing claims, such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia and Brunei. During the past week, Navy warships operated near the Spratlys and Paracel Islands, two of the archipelagos China has claimed most vehemently. The guided missile cruiser USS Bunker Hill sailed near the Spratlys on Wednesday as part of its so-called freedom of navigation operations. They are intended to challenge assertions by China and other claimant nations that military passing near the islands must first receive authorization. The Air Force sortie on Thursday follows a similar B-1 bomber round trip April 22 from Ellsworth to Japan, where a B-1B Lancer joined 15 Japanese fighters for training near Misawa Air Base.